Hi and welcome to our latest video AdVINEture. Today we get to sit down with the extremely knowledgeable and always entertaining Stu Smith of Smith-Madrone Wines.
Smith-Madrone is one of the highest elevation wineries in Napa Valley, sitting near the top of Spring Mountain. They have 35 acres that they dry farm and grow some delicious Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, and interesting for the Napa Valley, some great Riesling as well too.
Cheers.
Cheers. Nice
We'll
to
drink
see you
to that.
again.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yes.
Tell
Good.
me, make me really, really envious. Are you happening to happen to be having Smith-Madrone Chardonnay in your glass?
No, Smith-Madrone Riesling,
Which is
2017.
That just got released, if I'm correct.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic.
And it just came out of the refrigerator.
perfect.
So
Totally.
it's just in time.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. So how have you been keeping? I mean, you guys have had a heck of a year. We can touch on COVID and everything else, but some of the footage coming out with the glass fire was just incredible.
Yeah, it's actually, as it gets further and further from the fire, it's actually becoming more and more daunting, because I had no idea just the amount of damage that had occurred that we have to take care of. And frankly, it's been very daunting. I during the fires, we were elated that we lost so little. We've done a lot of prep. You can't do a lot of work once the fire starts. And that's really what saved our bacon here, is that we've done a lot of work for the last 6, 8, 10 years. You have to understand, you have to buy into it. Absolute, it becomes part of you that only you can save your property. We have what's called CAL FIRE, California Department of Fire. And if you think you're going to be saved by the cavalry coming in, CAL FIRE, you're mistaken. They can't be everywhere because it's so enormous. And so to survive this, you have to have the attitude that at the minimum, the first 72 hours, you are on your own. You embrace that. When you internalize it, you look at a tree that you used to like and you still love, and you're going, is it the tree or is it the winery? Is it the tree or is it the house? Which one are we gonna take? And so you're having to make all of these really tough decisions that really 10 years ago nobody thought about. Oh, we also lost 130 wood fence posts. We then have do the gates, and then we have to pull 15,000 feet of fence and retighten it. That, and then we're also trying to finish up with pruning. It's amazing. We only got telephone back mid-January. We didn't get power from PG&E until November 3rd. So it's been pretty interesting. And then on top of that, the wine that came in early, the white seems okay. The reds came in under the Hennessy LMU fire, and that seems okay also, although maybe a little suspect. And then we were going to harvest the Cabernet Franc, which was a beautiful crop, starting on Monday morning, September 28th. Well, the fire started on Sunday morning, the 27th, and we didn't harvest it until well after mid-October. So that wine is not going to make it into the bottle. Our winery, you've been to it, is really put in a really safe spot. We had no clue that we were putting it in a safe spot when we built it there. We were lucky. There are some people on the mountain who put wineries in places that they didn't think about it either, and they were unlucky. If you evacuate as they want you to, what then happens is you can't get back onto your property. If you can't get on your property, you can't protect it. We have things called nixels down here, which are kind of like an emergency warning system, and they send out alerts to everybody. And our Nixle went off at about 4:30, and so I got up there around, I don't know, 5:30, and it was still very, very dark, and the whole side of the mountain was on fire, but it was on the opposite side. It was on the east side of the valley, east side of Silverado Trail, and there was no clue in my brain that it would ever cross the valley. But as the day went on and we were doing harvest, and out somewhere around noon, I started thinking about, well, what if this thing gets across the valley? So then I went into fire protection mode, and we have a plan of what to do, and figured it out. And so all of a sudden I had to go and start moving everything that was vulnerable to fire coming up one of the canyons, up what's called the Mill Creek watershed. I moved all of that stuff and all of our equipment that could be vulnerable to a fire out into the vineyard, because our vineyards don't burn. And it was over an abundance of caution. Never did I really internalize or think that the fire could cross the valley. So we went home around 7 o'clock that night, and I get a phone call around 8 or 8:15 saying, Stu, your place is on fire. And so I jump in the car, I call Sam, Charlie, we head up to the winery. And when I drove through, there was no fire anywhere for me to see. I saw nothing. I looked in my rearview mirror and went, whoops, that's where it is. So not only had it crossed the valley, it had crossed the mountainside. And then Sam drove up about 20 minutes after I got there, and he said the whole canyon was on fire. Had it not been for my friend calling us, we wouldn't have been able to get up there until Tuesday. 3 of our neighbors were families that left that evening. They couldn't get back until Tuesday either, and their wineries burned down on Monday morning.
Oh.
It's quite a it's quite an ordeal, and it's the gift that keeps us on giving. We probably will be years before we're back to normal. It's just devastated the landscape on Spring Mountain and other parts of the valley. I'd say probably 80% of our Douglas fir trees are dead. And that's why we're having to do the emergency log, because otherwise, if we don't log them within the next 10 months or less, they'll be dead as a doornail. And so you have all these trees standing vertically that, and especially Douglas fir trees, which would be like pine trees. They're softwood trees. They're standing there dead, dry, and if another fire gets going, they'll it's a vertical ladder going straight up. It would be catastrophic. And then for all of your Canadian viewers, we're going to make a princely sum of $475 per 1,000 board feet of timber. And it's going to cost us to fall, load, deliver, process to the mill. And so that'll be about $450 in cost. So we're going to make a grand prize of $25 per 1,000. But that doesn't include all of the permitting process. So we're hoping not to lose too much. So it's just nuts.
But it's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard that description. We've the fires in 2017 and the fires that happened. You don't, as somebody who's not in the business, you don't think of all of those things. And as you said, the daunting and overwhelming work that takes place for months and years after. I mean, it's just, and then coming on the heels of a big fire just a few years ago, it's just, I mean, congratulations on your stamina and your perseverance, because we are massive fans of your wines, and it would be such a shame. And when you talk about those fir trees, I mean, for anybody who hasn't been to your winery, that has got to be one of our favorite winery views anywhere in the world that we've been. It's just stunning.
When I get a little down over all of this, I think about one of my other buddies on Spring Mountain, who's the vineyard manager for this property. They lost 16 structures. He lost 40,000 vines. He's reinstalling over 100 miles of drip hose. So when I feel a little burdened, I think of what my friend is going through. Our vineyards are kind of like a sea, an island in the sea of burnt forest. And because the forest hadn't burned in 150 years, it burned really hot. Now, fortunately for visitors, most of the damage won't be seen. It's lower down on our property. It's been a hell of a year. And then on top of that, we're looking at maybe the worst drought in anybody's memory or written recorded history. The only thing we're missing is frogs.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Well,
Stu, tell us, you mentioned about losing the Cabernet Franc this year, and I'm interested because when we met with you up at the vineyard, I think you were telling us that the Cabernet Franc was relatively recently planted. Is that correct?
We did the first initial planting in '98, and then we did the next planting in either 2008 or 2010. I kind of get mixed up on which one. So it was either 8 or 10. And it was a beautiful crop, and the wines, the red wines, had a spectacular color. Have a spectacular color. But there's so much concern over the fire and what it's called smoke taint, that we're not sure what we're going to do with the vintage, whether we will bottle it or not, or just sell it off. It's a decision that we really haven't come to grips with yet. We just don't know. Clearly, the Cab Franc will not ever go into a Smith-Madrone bottle. That's for doggone sure. I don't think it's going to go into anybody's bottle. And you can't distill it off because those flavors come over with the alcohol. So you can't distill it and leave the bad stuff behind and keep the good stuff. So I think that's just going to be a complete loss.
What about the other blocks? What about your Cabernet, your Chardonnay, the Riesling?
Well, they taste pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. The whites are what we call below threshold, 0.5 parts per billion. They're two markers for smoke taint. There's guaiacol and 4-methyl guaiacol, ethyl or 4-methyl guaiacol. And then they're both in the free form and the bound form. So, and they're not necessarily good markers, but they're the only markers we have. It's the only way that we can right now. Hopefully, in the future, they will have better indicators of the quality or the damage from smoke to the wine. But right now, that's all we have, and so. Anything below 0.5 parts per billion of these two compounds is considered good, considered below threshold. You can go up to about 5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there, and you should be okay. But the problem with the bound form is right now we're only tasting and smelling the free form. The bound form changes with time and releases with age. So, and this happened to us in 2008. And I went back to one of my professors at UC Davis, and he said, look, think of it as an iceberg. Only 10% of the iceberg is sticking up. So you do a thing called reverse osmosis, and you take some of the good stuff and you get rid of the bad stuff. So you do that and you go, waha, we're done. But very slowly, the iceberg raises up out of the water. So where you were, now you have another 10% sticking out of the water. So you go, okay, well, whack it again. And then you whack it again. And pretty soon, there's nothing left of the wine. It's just not there. And all you have is a wine which is vinous. You know it's wine, but there's no flesh on the bones. There's no suppleness. There's no there. It's a skeleton of a person, but it's only partially there. And so we have no real way of dealing with it. And I think we will. I know Australia has done an awful lot of work on this. University of Washington State University is doing a lot of work on it. UC Davis everybody is getting into the game, trying to figure it out. The fires caused Napa Valley $3.7 billion in losses. And that's a lot for a little community. And you would think there would be a scramble by various government organizations to do something. And as far as I can tell, from October 7th, which is when the Tubbs and Nuns fire and all of that broke loose, to today, virtually nothing has been done. And California has just been burning every single year. It's not as though we went with the 17 fires and nothing happened until 2020. We had fires all up and down the state for both 17, 18, 19, and 20. There is a complete lack of leadership about this, and it's catastrophic.
Well, Stu, tell us how are things looking this year? So the vineyards survived, and vineyards often do. They are a fire break. Is the hope that this could be 2021 a return to normal, whatever that might mean?
We would love that. The concern for almost all of us now is is there enough groundwater to get the vines through the growing season?
Right.
We did get through 76, 77. Those years when St. Helena had an average of 12 inches each year. But so far, St. Helena is at 8 inches. And that's really just paltry. So a lot of our reservoirs are dry or very low. And I'm just thinking about, are we going to have enough water for the winery to process come harvest?
Right.
Because we have a well, we have springs, and we pull out of the creek, but the creek's dry, and the springs aren't looking very good. Now that one of the positive things, if you can look at it this way, is that because the fire has incinerated so much of the forest will not be using nearly as much water as it has been in the past. And so what water is there might get into the creeks and the streams and into the aquifer, but at 8 inches, I'm not sure that's going to get down very far. But at least there won't be the competition with the forest because most of the forest is dead.
So, Stu, tell me, you're at Smith-Madrone, you dry farm, you don't irrigate. Yeah. And so that means your roots are probably going deeper than your neighbors who do irrigate. Might that practice benefit you? You know, those deep roots, might they find more water when it's such a scarce resource?
I hope so, but I don't know.
Right.
I think one of the things that we're going to have to look at is we're into March. We've had some issues with March before, where March actually has become, the March miracle and given us a lot of rain. While this year doesn't look all that hopeful, we do have a nice little storm coming in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that may give us on the mountain 2-3 inches of rain. And that would be really significant. And if we could have another 2 or 3 or 4 inches of rain before the end of the season, that would be great. One of the things that we will be doing to counteract this is we will probably go through right at set. In other words, the plants flower, and then they set their crop, bloom. So you have flower, bloom, fertilization, set or shatter, and then we'll see what the crop level is. And if it's anything other than a smaller crop than normal, we will go through and thin it back dramatically. Because we can't ask the vines to carry an above average crop without any water, especially this year. And so we'll probably make a major effort to thin the crop down. We'll also probably go through and cultivate at least every other row where we can, so that the cover crop doesn't take any more moisture than is absolute necessary. Now, some of our vineyards are planted more or less going up and down a hill, and so that makes it harder to cultivate. Not because we can't do it. It's that I don't want to expose the soil to a vertical position where we may get a big thunderstorm or something of that nature that could start erosion.
And I know that your vineyard is very steep. I think some of the slopes are 35 degrees or something like that. I mean, it's steep.
Yeah, but those where it's really steep, we don't go up and down the rows. That's too steep for us. Not that it can't be done. It's just that I don't think, I believe that Murphy was an optimist. And if you're harvesting going up in really a steep row, somebody's got to sit in that tractor with those brakes on all the time, because you got a ton of grapes behind you. Yeah. And if you get off the tractor or it's just not a good thing.
No, and of all people, I mean, you either saw the property or purchased it in 70, 71. So you're looking at 50 years of working with that property. You've probably seen it all. And I mean, the change from when you first got it to now, I'd be really interested to know sort of what has been the biggest change or challenge that you either hadn't expected or that just you had expected and it was just greater than that.
Well, I did walk the property the first time in the early fall of 1970, and I was pretty young, pretty naive. Almost everything, all the changes that happened, I wasn't expecting because I didn't know enough. I've seen, well, until this year, the driest year. I've seen the West year. We've had 108 inches of rain. The coldest three vintages that have ever occurred were 2009, 10, and 11. The hottest decade, I think, was the 1980s. This year has 2020 and 2021 seemed to be especially windy. Seems strange, but very windy. So from a weather point of view, and then I think it was 1998, 1989. Our reservoir froze over, and I had a brand new Makita cordless drill, and I went down to drill a hole in the ice to see how thick it was, but it didn't work. So I said, to hell with that, and got a shotgun and blasted a couple of holes in the ice. Well, it's California. Okay. We're not Canadians. We don't get ice. So that's been the coldest we've ever seen. 1973, we had 2 feet of snow. That's the most snow we've ever had. I've seen all the extremes from a weather point of view. The industry, Napa Valley especially, is always changing. One of the interesting things from a political land use is that people who come here from other areas, as did I, they want to freeze frame it. But what they don't understand is that it's been changing all the time. And it will always change. It's kind of like the waves coming in from the ocean onto a beach. It's a relentless change. Whether you want it to change or not, it's going to change. With the .com folks, Mr. and Mrs. Got Rocks, as I like to say, who sold their widget company for a bazillion dollars, and they're looking around at age 45, going, "Well, what are we going to do now, honey? Oh, well, let's start a winery in the Napa Valley. We like going to the Napa Valley." So their budget is blown out by 4 times. And after about 9 years, they're going, I thought we were going to retire. This is a lot of work. How do we get out of this in a graceful way? And so that's the kind of change that we're dealing with now, is that all of those uber, as we now know, high net worth individuals are coming into the valley and going, and some of them are now going, how do we get out of this? That's one of the changes that I didn't see, but which is going on all the time. So then the next question is, what's going to be the next change? And sometimes I know where we are on this kind of evolution of change. Now I don't. I can't see where it's going to happen. And that may be the COVID issue. That may be the millennial issue. That may be that Napa Valley wine prices have gotten so high. There's all of these things that are out there that you're trying to, put your hands on and figure it all out. And then there's this push for all these wacky varietals. And that's, I think, a pushback on price. They're funny varietals. They're goofy varietals. They're not really important varietals for a reason, but now they're coming into their own because they're really inexpensive. And it's kind of a pushback. It's a tall poppy syndrome type thing.
I feel like with your experience, you should start a consulting firm for anybody who wants to get into wine so they can hear how it really is.
They wouldn't believe me. They wouldn't believe me. All they want to hear is good news. They don't want to hear the truth. Thing is that, every athlete, every celebrity, anybody who has fame and wealth wants to get into the wine business. And as I like to say, you know what? I don't want to get into conducting business. I don't want to compete with you. I don't want to play baseball against you. I don't want to play football against you, or ice skate against you. Why do you want to come in and compete with me just because you have too much money? And a friend of mine who is a writer for the Washington Post was interviewing me about that same time, and he was asking me about all these celebrities coming in, and I said, it's God's way of telling you have too much money.
Yeah.
And he's going to liberate some of it from you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that we were truly surprised with when we came and tasted your wines. I mean, I think that Chardonnay is probably one of our very favorite Chardonnays out of the Napa Valley. The Riesling is stunning, incredibly fair price point.
Yeah. I mean, $40 for your Chardonnay is, for that quality, and then $52 for your regular Cabernet Sauvignon. Twice that price.
We're up to 58 now.
Oh, bandit.
But with age, I think we were. You hold them back, what, 5 or so years?
Well, we're on our 4 years. We're on our 16 Cabernet.
Yeah.
What I would say is that one of the nice things about making great wine, or if I can be so bold, excellent, good wine, occasionally great wine, is that you don't need special equipment. You don't need high-tech equipment. You don't need all this stuff. What you need is the right attitude as for both the grower and the winemaker. And you have to bring in the best grapes. If you bring in the best grapes, none of that equipment matters. You're really there to extract out what Mother Nature puts into those grapes, into those berries. And that's your job as the grape grower. Your job as the winemaker. When those grapes are harvested that day, they can't get any better than that day. And your job as the winemaker is to extract all of that quality out of the grapes and into the glass of wine. You might get 100% of it. You might get 85%. You may get 50% of it. And that's, 50% of the quality. It's not very good. But it doesn't matter what it is with your technology. You can have, a press that you just spent $250,000 on. And if the grapes aren't any good, your press is useless. You spent too much money on pretty shiny equipment instead of doing the hard work, which is farming the grapes. And people ask me, how you doing? You say, okay. But the new okay has got a very low bar.
Yes.
A really low bar.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you turn or where you look. It's all mucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to deal with COVID, which is extraordinarily difficult for all of us. It's another thing to deal with state and local politics, international politics, and border closings. I mean, my God. And tariffs and all of this other stuff. It just makes everybody go nuts. And it doesn't seem as though there's any respite to it. Yeah. And this all adds on to well, what I've been saying too for about 6-7 months now is that for those of us who are working, we have never worked harder in our whole lives. But at the same time, we've never run into more roadblocks. Things that were easy in the past are no longer easy. So it's just harder for all of us to try to get through all of this. And then you throw the fires on it and everything else. And it's, I think we're all a complete globe of walking depressed people.
Stu, you're absolutely right about that. And, particularly, you as grape farmers, and with the fires that you faced, you guys have faced among the worst hardships. But the whole world, has faced a new level of hardship. And what we all have to be careful to do is acknowledge the hardship and seek out some pleasure to try and counterbalance it. And I'll never forget, after we had toured the vineyard, sitting with you, having a glass of wine, and you were sort of waxing philosophical, and you said, the wine's main purpose is to bring its drinker pleasure. And
yes.
You said, hedonistic pursuit, and you're so spot on. You said it so well. And I think it's really important for people to realize now that they need a bit of pleasure in their lives to counterbalance all the hardship that's going on in their lives. And what greater way to introduce a little bit of pleasure into your life than to have a delicious glass of wine and share it with a good friend. And yes. that should be what everybody should be learning from this and trying to do as much of as they can.
Yes, I agree. There's no question about it. And we will eventually get back to normal times sometime soon, I hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, and for us, distribution throughout the United States and the world just plummeted.
Yeah.
But people at home needed that relaxation. And so sales have been, we didn't see, you asked about what I didn't see. I didn't see this going into the pandemic and the shutdown. I was deathly afraid how things were going to go. And actually, one of the things that happened for us is that our sales changed dramatically. We didn't make very many sales to distributors in this country. There were a few, but few and far between. But our direct-to-consumer sales, which we have always relied on, is boomed. And so that was really good. Our mailing list people who buy our wine have been enormously supportive, and we're trying to be equally creative. And so one of the things that we did, as an example, is that we have a certain amount of inventory in our wine library, and so we were digging through our wine library, and one of the things we did was put together a 6-bottle vertical of Riesling. So we did 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 vintages. And so people could go back and see what the older vintages were like, and they had a little preview of what was coming up. And that was really successful for us.
Stu, and the viewers who are watching and listening to you, I'm sure some are going to be excited to try and find some of these wines themselves. So are you accepting orders online? Can people go to your website and shop?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That's how we stay in business, is our website. People coming in and buying. Yes. Yeah. We're not a winery that says, oh, we just make wine, we don't sell it. No, we like selling wine. Selling wine is good. Let's be clear about that. Selling wine is good.
It's a very good thing. And I know that people listening are going to be wanting to buy. So is it Smith-Madrone? There's a hyphen in there, I think?
No, just straight Smith-Madrone.com.
One of these days, the borders will reopen, Stu. And I tell you, you're first on our list. I hope that you'll host and welcome us again like you did 2 summers ago, because that was an extraordinary visit. And we'd sure love to see you again. And right now, I just want to thank you for the time that you've given us this afternoon. It's great to see you.
Could I make one little comment before we sign off?
Please.
Get your LCBOs to open up their borders to little wineries so that you don't have to buy it all the way from us. You could, find it in your province. It's selling to Canadian provinces is the singularly most difficult thing in the entire world of wine.
We hear you. You are preaching to the converted now.
So much.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me started. I mean, yeah, no. If I could have any sway with these guys, believe me, I would. And lots of people have tried, and well, with no success.
And Canadians would love this wine, and we absolutely hear how painful it is, because we're on the other side of that, and we know. So fortunately, we're usually, other than this year, able to travel and stock up. But this has been a particularly detrimental year to our cellar. So we're going to have to replenish. But before we sign off, one of the things we'd love to do is just do a quick rapid fire 4 questions just for fun.
Sure.
If you're up for it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what was the wine that made you want to be in the business?
Ooh. Lancer's Matus Rosé.
Did you say Matus?
Yeah, Lancers and Matus, those 2 wines, because I was in college, and Gallo Hardy Burgundy, 3 of them. I was in college and realized that I liked wine more than beer, which was pretty strange for a college boy. And Lancers and Matus came in that kind of terracotta bottle, and Gallo Hardy Burgundy you could buy in a half gallon for $125, and went to $129. I'm going, yeah, baby, that's my industry.
Okay. We're catching on to you now. And what's your favorite grape variety to work with?
Oh, that's like asking me which kid I like best.
Gonna make you choose.
I love the way Cabernet smells when you bring it in from the field and it goes through the stemmer crusher. The Cabernet's magical. But what was the best one to work with?
Your favorite to work with?
Favorite. Well, Cabernet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your, and please don't say Matus at this point in your life, what's your house wine or your go-to pizza wine? Your everydayer?
Riesling. Riesling. That's what I'm drinking now.
Yeah. Well, your Riesling is pretty spectacular. And the last question, what is the most memorable wine you've ever had and why?
2. Both Pinot Noirs. One was a bottle of 66 Primard Rougienne. And the other one was a bottle of Burgundy, Clos de Vougeot, 1998 by Anne Gros.
Great.
Incredible. Well, thank you again so much for your time. It was such a pleasure to see you again. And
Yes.
all of the difficulties, you're looking really well. And we
Thank
wish
you.
the very best until we can raise the glass again in person. It's just
Perfect.
lovely to see you again. Cheers.
Yes.